On this week's episode of Open Mic Night of the Living Dead, we will be taking an in-depth look at the reasons why I never became the pop star I always dreamed of becoming, mainly due to the infestation of my mind and soul by a dream-crushing demon that I caught from watching somebody die. You know.
As one does.
I always talk about that when people meet me. It's a miracle I found a life partner. That's right. This is Open Mic Night of the Living Dead, and this week, we're doing our first sequel. It's Smile 2.
The creature's creeping right behind you. I hope you finally find a little slice of peace and light. 'Cause it comes crashing down tonight. Welcome to the open mic. When we call your name, you'll die. But there's no need to dread. This is the open mic night of the living dead.
Okay.
All right. Smile 2. Sequeling it up.
Sequeling it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are. Yes, you are.
This is our first sequel. We've been craving for it. Not Wes Craven, just like desiring it deeply.
We have been desiring hit of the sequel. It's true. And of all the films that could have been selected, Smile 2, one of the most recent. We just watched the original.
Yes, both temporally and compared to us covering the original. Because this came out in 2024, but...
Oh, I wasn't even thinking that. I was thinking more in terms of when we covered the original. Yes, but you're right. It is one of the more recent movies.
And, you know, I think Rachel had some trepidation as we pushed into this.
I did have some misgivings, it's true.
Because this type of movie scares her very much.
It does, but, and we'll get into this even more as we continue, this didn't hit me as hard the second time as it did the first time. And Smile 1 did hit me just as hard the second time.
Interesting. You were also dealing with some other stuff, which we'll get into as well.
I was.
That maybe distracted you from... We might have found a way to get you through these movies.
Oh boy, I can't wait to dive deeper into that. Anyway, I'm Rachel.
And I'm John. And I do think that this was as much as you are not maybe looking forward to covering this movie, you're not necessarily covering the movie, but watching the movie, I think it was a great sequel to be our first sequel because I think it's an example of a really well done sequel.
I will 100% agree with that.
Because as we know, sequels can go many directions.
There's some sequels on our sequel that are really not good.
That's a fact.
Yeah, and art's subjective and it's still a fact.
Yeah. I know she's thinking of one in particular that she's not going to be excited about when we spin it.
Or maybe I will. I have yet to spend 2 hours talking trash about a movie, so, you know, we've got that to look forward to.
Yes.
But this one was not trash.
No, not at all. And largely because it has a lot of the same creative core involved in this. But before I get into that, this is a deep dive episode. If this is your first time joining us, we're Open Mic Night of the Living Dead. Like she said, she's Rachel, I'm John. And we started this podcast because we love horror movies. And we met at an open mic night because we're both singer-songwriters.
Yep.
So at the end of this, like we do every deep dive episode, we have each written an original song inspired by this film, Smile 2, on this occasion. And we'll be performing it each other. We'll be performing it for each other for the first time here for you all to witness and experience for yourselves. But that's all to say that because this is a deep dive episode, we're going to be getting into all the spoilers. And so if you have not seen this film yet, definitely recommend it. Give this a pause. Go check it out. Hopefully you have seen it. And if you haven't, you want to join us anyway, you'll learn all about it. And maybe you'll want to watch it after you've heard us talk about it.
Maybe. You okay over there?
Yep, ran out of the air.
Well, That's okay. Keep practicing.
Do we have any content warning at all?
Yeah, we do. Not only do we have spoiler warnings, but we definitely have some content warnings like the first one. This film dives deep into trauma, but it also adds on some addiction, substance abuse, relapse materials. There is suicide and death by suicide content warnings as well. So if any of this is something that is sensitive for you or you would rather not listen to, go ahead and find another episode. We don't talk about this stuff everywhere, but only when the film does. And this film definitely does. So
For sure. But I don't think this is going to be as heavy as like our Rosemary's Baby episode.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. Different dark materials, but not quite as dark.
Did you note when we first watched this movie?
I didn't in my notes, but I have it in my record keeping.
We didn't.
I can tell you in a moment.
We didn't get to see it in theaters, and I'm assuming we had seen the original by the time this came out, but I'm not certain. It's possible they were both out, right? Or maybe not.
We saw this movie in December of 2024.
December of 2024. So that's not long after it came out. It must have been streaming soon after it came out.
Yeah, because it was released in October.
But
So we must have seen it the minute it came out.
yeah, it must have gone to streaming quickly. But what were your expectations going into it the first time we watched it?
I think I was excited because I remembered liking the first one. I was also really scared. And I also remember the first time watching it, it really messed me up. In terms of the nervous system kind of reactivity that these kinds of movies can cause.
Well, I was definitely interested by the premise. I was interested to see where they were going to go with this. So we're going to talk all about that as well as, going from the therapist to a pop star is a big shift in the type of person that is being infected.
Yeah, really big shift in our main character protagonist.
So, Miss Rachel,
Yes,
do you have a summary for me?
I do. A pop star on the comeback tour of her life inherits a deadly curse. And this time, there's an audience watching every second. It kind of references the first one,
What does?
my summary.
I mean, I guess. And it's not exactly, she's
An
not,
inherited curse, maybe I should have said.
but also she's preparing for her tour. She's not on the tour yet. Which
Okay,
is,
fair.
I'm not trying to parse words, but it's
Fine.
slight-
A pop star preparing for the comeback tour of her life inherits a deadly supernatural curse.
very nice.
Yeah,
Did
that
you
works.
write it yourself?
I mean, I kind of like combined things really quickly and threw it together.
Sounds like my life.
It's look.
All right. So this movie, as we said previously, was released on October 18th, 2024. It was distributed by Paramount Pictures, as was the first. And as such, it's currently available for streaming on Paramount Plus if you have that, not a sponsor. And returning to helm the ship is writer-director and now producer Parker Finn. This movie has a runtime of 127 minutes, so clocking in at just over 2 hours. It was made on a budget of approximately $28 million and earned a worldwide gross of around $138 million, which obviously is still a great success, but in context of the first movie, I can't remember what the budget was of the first movie. It was definitely
I have
less.
that it was 17 million.
So a lower budget, and the first movie made 217 million approximately, while this one only made 138 million. So the sequel didn't match the original's box office explosion, but it still performed strongly enough to confirm that Smile could work as a franchise. And as we're talking about this right now, I looked on IMDb, and it does appear that Smile 3 is in pre-production.
It is. And I'm actually more excited about that than I was before we watched this.
Well, I'm excited to hear that you're excited because I'm excited.
Yay.
And later on, I have sort of at the end of Murder, Mayhem, and Myths, there's not really many myths for this, but I kind of put a couple of discussion notes, and interested to talk a little bit about what we might foresee for Smile 3. So
Cool. I like that.
this movie garnered generally positive reception. Earning major praise was Naomi Scott's performance, as it should have. Nailed it out of the park, or hit it out of the park.
No, that was good. I like it when you combine metaphors.
And was also praised for its bigger scale, its visual confidence, the choreography and staging, and of course the more ambitious set pieces. Some of the common criticisms were that it was longer than the first, more excessive, less grounded, familiar curse mechanics, and that the mythology remains vague, which I think can go on either side of praise or spectrum depending on how you like your horror movie franchises, which it's pretty great because now we get to sort of begin to discuss sequels. I think if we weren't already planning to do our encore next week about sort of our first year in podcasting and sort of a peek behind the curtain and all of that, I think, the next time we do a sequel, we could do like a sequel encore
Ooh, yeah.
But we can, touch on some of that as we're going through today. But we certainly know that as horror franchises expand, they tend to look further into the mythology of the killer or whatever we're talking about. And that doesn't always work. Sometimes leaving things more ambiguous works for me, and I like that. And I also like it sometimes when the mythology is expanded. So I didn't mind that the mythology remains vague at the end of this. I don't think I need to know, but maybe we'll find out how this all started.
Yeah.
In terms of some of the positive and mixed positive reviews, we have Olin Gleiberman for Variety saying that Naomi Scott's performance as a pop star diva grappling with demons, including her own, gives Parker Finn's sequel a genuine emotional center. And Austin Goslin at Polygon said rather than simply rehashing the original, Parker Finn pushes his clever premise to its logical extreme and builds some incredibly scary scenes to match. David Fear at Rolling Stone, who was born to be a horror critic apparently,
Obviously.
said that there are long stretches where you actually forget you're watching a Smile movie and couldn't be blamed for thinking you've stumbled into a slightly more nightmarish version of Beyond the Lights. I don't know what Beyond the Lights is, do you? I meant to look it up.
Nah, sounds like a music show of some sort.
Yeah, and he also noted that parts of the movie feel like darker pop star drama, which I guess must be Beyond the Lights. And then Brian Tallarico over at RogerEbert.com said that Naomi Scott gives one of the best horror performances of the year.
Okay.
And his review highlights that the movie begins by resolving Joel's fate from the first film, immediately tying the sequel back to Smile. But of course, we have some more mixed negative kind of reviews. Benjamin Lee for The Guardian called the glossier follow-up to 2022's hugely successful Curse horror is well made and well acted, but the franchise is struggling to carve out its own identity. Not sure Benjamin Lee is... I don't know how much he's into the horror world, but I'm kind of into the identity it's been carving out. And he also said, I'm not sure if Smile 2 really adds much to an experience that we don't already know, but it makes for a neat, well-utilized setting for a horror film about losing one's mind. Bill Jabiri at Vulture said, as Skye becomes increasingly unable to tell what's actually happening and what's a waking nightmare, we should feel more for her and we should feel more with her. Instead, we lose interest as the whole thing becomes pointless and even a little cynical and cruel. Not sure I'm with you there, but...
I think that says more about him than it does about the character.
Yeah, he was just sleepy. I get that sometimes. I have to stop sometimes a movie I'm watching if I'm watching late. I get that sleepy and I'm like, I'm not going to be feeling this. James Matron for NME said, sadly, Smile 2 doesn't feel as fresh as its predecessor. And I don't disagree with that. I mean, I do disagree with that. I don't agree with that. It feels very fresh for a sequel. But what do I know? Hey, if we were going to go see there were other horror movies in 2024, and, we've talked a little bit about the post-COVID sort of horror boom, if you want to call it that.
Yep.
Obviously, 2024 is a part of that boom. It was a very strong horror year with multiple lanes active. You had franchise horror, religious horror, prestige and body horror, indie horror, serial killer horror, and even gothic remake horror. So if we were going to the theater, which we did a couple of times in 2024 to catch a horror movie, you could have seen Longlegs, which we saw in the theater.
We did.
The Substance, Nosferatu, Alien Romulus, Oddity, that might have been streaming only, but I'm not sure. In a Violent Nature, Cuckoo, Heretic, Late Night with the Devil, The First Omen, Abigail, Immaculate, Maxine, and a movie that is kind of a sister film to this, Trap by M. Night Shyamalan.
Oh, I guess so. I didn't think of them that way, but they both have pop stars.
Right. Well, the setting is very much the same. So interesting to see. And obviously, well, for me, Smile 2 is much stronger, which I think based on your reaction when we watched Trap is probably accurate for you as well.
Yeah, I felt like they were totally different. I didn't even think about them in the same category, but I guess, like maybe on a surface level.
They both, the protagonists in each. Well, I guess Trap doesn't focus on.
That's what I'm thinking. That's why it didn't click for me.
Half.
For the second half, it sees more of her. But yeah, no, that's interesting.
You have like the on-stage performances, all the choreography. Right. You had both movies have the pop star playing intimate version of a piano-only song, which
I don't remember it that well.
Smile 2 pulled it off a lot better.
Yeah.
Seemed a lot more natural. But that was horror in 2024. What do you got on ratings?
Ratings, IMDb 6.7, seems about right. Rotten Tomatoes, 86% critics and 81% audience, which is higher. The original only had 79% critics, or 80% critics, and 77 audience. So it seems like this one was slightly better received. On Letterboxd, it's a 3.2. Among my friends and people I follow, it's 3.5, which maybe shows you the way I skew. And personally, I think this is a solid 3.5 for me.
Yeah, I think I ended up scoring them the same.
Which was?
7.5 out of 10 for me. I do like the second one a little bit more, and I can't push it up to an 8 because for me, that's sort of like next tier. And then I was wondering if I need to push the first one down to a 7. And I'm not sure I can do that either. What's interesting is that the fondness I have for this movie sticks with me more than my fondness for the first movie. After I've watched the first movie, I really like it a lot. And it's not to say that over time I like it less, but I don't have as much of an interest in revisiting it, maybe.
Well, I think the first one is a lot more intimate and it's a lot more personal. And even though this is personal, it's also a much wider scale, wider scope. And you love pop stars. Well,
that might be a bit of a stretch.
You like pop stars. Is that a stretch?
I like them to a certain extent. I'm now a 43-year-old. Like, I'm not.
I know, but like you, when you were younger, you really liked Michael Jackson, and you've always been like, you write really well, and you're really interested in pop music as a genre. You are really good at writing catchy tunes. And I think that it doesn't surprise me that you like this one more.
Yeah, no, I do like the scale of it, but I really like the first one too. So at the end of the day, they both end up being 7.5s. I think on our 3-tier scale, it's pretty obvious where this goes. 1's total trash, never watch it. 2 is the general world of horror films from good to great. And 3 is top tier, groundbreaking, influential, genre-changing type stuff. And I think this is a firm to 2+.
Solid 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, solid 2 for sure.
All right. Are you ready to make a movie?
Let's make a movie.
Let's make a movie. We'll make sure that it's spooky. I sure hope that it's groovy. Let's make a movie.
Okay, movie making time.
Here we are.
Like I mentioned before, we have the sort of the creative core of key personnel has returned in this movie, which is really important, I think, to its success, and not just, I don't mean commercial success, but the success of the film being good. Because as we've seen in many a horror franchise, they get sort of, the studio wants to make another, or whoever has the rights wants to, cash in on the success, and you often end up with a different writing team or different directors, that sort of thing. And because we have a returning core, I'm not going to go into the detail, the background of a lot of the same people. You should check out our episode on Smile if you haven't yet. That was episode 44, not too long ago, where we do go into some of that detail. But returning as the writer-director is Parker Finn, who I'm sure I will call Finn Parker at least once during this episode because I reverse those names in my head constantly. Because he's returning, the mythology stays tonally consistent, the visual grammar carries over, and it makes the sequel feel like an expansion rather than one of these studio money grabs. In terms of Finn's philosophy in creating the sequel, he said that after the first film, there was still a lot of interesting stuff to explore in the world of Smile, but that a sequel needed a fresh way into the concept that audiences might not expect. And he describes Smile 2 as an exploration of a pop star's downfall, a story about someone unable to overcome what has been put on her, and a way to move the curse into a glitzy, public, high-pressure celebrity world. And so why center this around a pop star? The first film really focused on private trauma. And what we talked about in that movie is part of the whole curse, it seems like, is that the monstrosity or the entity likes to prey on people who have suffered past trauma, and in order to exploit and manipulate that in its parasitic journey to overtake and then spread itself to the next victim. And in that first film, everything was sort of in therapy offices, hospitals, home spaces, and the main character, Rose, was isolated through the disbelief of the people closest to her. However, in this second film, they took the trauma very public. So not only is it a public figure, but the trauma she's experienced in the past is also very public and focuses on fame and performance. And, you have a lot of the handlers and the fans. So the isolation is more through constant observation.
Right, which we'll get more into with the themes later on.
Absolutely. One thing that I really liked that Finn said, he wanted the ending to have a meta quality where the arena audience on screen seems to stare through the screen at the real movie audience. So like when the stuff's happening to Sky, there's like an extended shot on the audience reacting to that, raising the question whether viewers are complicit by coming back for more Smile. Entertainment Weekly also reported Finn saying that Sky being taken over on stage in front of tens of thousands of fans felt like the most horrifying thing he could do. And then there's the question of whether that could be live streamed, people's phones.
Oh, yeah, I've got that later on, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then he suggested that the franchise has only scratched the surface and that future entries could get increasingly off the rails. So I'll be interested to see what that means.
Yeah, I mean, how much bigger can you get if you go beyond tens of thousands plus whatever they're streaming to? And how does it work? Are they all infected now? Because then I think it's the end of the world. But I guess we'll get there.
One person we didn't really talk about last time, and I'm not going to talk about him long, but is Elliot Greenberg, who's the editor. And obviously, editing plays a huge role in horror movies. in all movies, obviously, but specifically, I think that it is a really important element of how the fear is presented and created and all of that. And that is Elliot Greenberg. Did I say Elliot Greenberg?
You just now? Yeah.
Okay. And he was the editor of the first film. And, you know, the Smile movies depend heavily on uncertainty between what's real and what is hallucination, and sort of the shifting between that reality and the hallucination. And as you're watching, you tend to be asking more and more, is this actually happening? And you can't just depend on the writing and the acting for that. It's the editing. And I don't know a lot about editing. I understand it. I edit the podcast. I edit music. Like, I get the concept, but in terms of visuals, I'd be interested to know, like, how much somebody shoots for a scene, and then do they leave a certain amount of time? Are they like shooting the scene for specifically what they want? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. No, and I don't know how it all works together, but
basically the sequel pushes all of these concepts much further. The scenes increasingly behave like nightmares through sudden transitions, false realities, time disorientation, and the hallucinations that continue longer before revealing themselves. So a lot of that magic is owed to Elliot Greenberg. So I just wanted to give him a shout out, because I don't think we did last time, as we often don't get into editing.
right. Production designer, did you have anything about that? Lester Cohen?
I didn't.
I had just seen something in one of the articles I was reading about how he built Sky's world to feel glossy, flashy, and sparkly, which I think is a really good description of how this film looked and felt as we were going through. So it's much shinier and sparklier than its predecessor.
Yeah, and from my understanding too, and there's some of this in cinematography, but that was a real intentional decision.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just because we have a bigger budget, we're making it glossier. We're focusing on a pop star, so.
Right, as opposed to a therapist who's meeting people in their quietest, darkest moments. This is big and huge, and part of the trauma is how inescapable observation is and how hard it is for Sky not to see herself all around her, right? Like reflections and doubles and all those kinds of things.
I did have the last person I was going to mention is the choreographer and movement person, Celia Rowson Hall.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to say about her. You should definitely look her up if you're interested in choreography, not just for film, but for music videos and stuff like that, because she's done a lot of that. Celia Rowson Hall is an American dancer, choreographer, filmmaker, and multidisciplinary artist. And her own site describes her work as combining narrative storytelling, modern dance, and film. And while she had started off more in the sort of the standard dance realm, she eventually started doing choreography for film. She did music videos for like Alicia Keys, Coldplay, Bleachers, MGMT, or Management. I'm not sure if you're supposed to say
I think it's MGMT.
MGMT. But she has worked on the films. She's done choreography, movement work on After Yang, X, After Sun, The Fits, Birds of Paradise, and several other films. And so when I see something like she did choreography and movement for X, I'm now interested in like learning more about that. I did not have time to do that for this show. We've got plenty to cover, but that's really interesting. And obviously her role is extremely important in this movie, because we have a pop star who has a group of dancers behind her. And Sky's identity and her performance identity depends on the choreography and her body control and her stage and public images. So the horror in this movie then turns all of those same tools against her by the end, in a very, very literal way in some cases.
Very true. Very true.
But that's sort of what I had on the production personnel.
Great.
And I'm just going to let the cat in.
Yeah, sounds good.
People want to know who let the dogs out, but nobody is ever asking who let the cat in.
Nope.
It's me.
So I guess that brings us to cast. And of course, we've got to begin with Naomi Scott, who plays Sky Riley. Her performance was universally praised, it seemed, even from folks for whom the movie didn't really work. Naomi Scott's performance as Sky still really landed. She's a British actress and singer. She was born in London. Her mother is Gujarati Indian from Uganda, which I don't know much about that at all. And her father is English, and both of her parents are pastors, which I thought was kind of interesting. As a bit of a pastor myself. And Velocipaster. Let's not talk about that movie. Her breakthrough roles have included Kimberly the Pink Ranger in Power Rangers in 2017. She was also Princess Jasmine in Disney's live-action Aladdin, and she was one of the 3 leads in the 2019 Charlie's Angels. So she's had a lot of action movies and things like that. She also was genuinely a pop singer before this as well. She had a track on the Lemonade Mouth soundtrack in 2011. Her single She's So Gone went platinum, and she released 2 solo EPs in the 2010s, which I did not know about her beforehand because I stopped knowing about music a long time ago.
It makes sense, though.
It does. She's got the actual skills and talents and seems very comfortable. She's playing the piano for real when she's playing. She also holds a black belt in karate, which has helped her handle the physicality of some of her roles. And also, as we know, we have children who've done both karate and dance, and a lot of those skills transfer over, especially with the forms and things. And so that physicality, I think, also helped her in this role significantly.
And that's because sometimes if you're confronted by like an angry stranger, you don't know if it's going to turn into a fight or a dance-off. And if you can, turning it into a dance-off will really heighten your chances of survival in a situation like that. So, I mean, it depends on how good your dancing is, I guess.
I guess. She was cast in December 2023. She was supposed to have a 30-minute coffee with Finn, and it turned into a 2.5-hour conversation about the character. She has spoken a lot in interviews about how important this character was to her and the way she kind of found her way to Sky, which I highly recommend. You check those out in the show notes. She only had 3 weeks to prepare. I saw on an interview she co-wrote several of Sky's songs, which I'm sure you'll talk about in the music part. She recorded her vocals fully in character, and then she did 2.5 days of dance rehearsal with the choreographer. And all of the choreography on screen is her. She did it herself. So really impressive.
She only rehearsed that for 2.5 days?
That's what it said
Crazy.
In this article. That really, really intense rehearsal. They had to do a reshoot, I guess, of the confrontation with her own double in the freezer room.
Mm-hmm.
And she called that 4-day reshoot the hardest stretch of her career, physically and emotionally, which makes a lot of sense. She was kind of hanging suspended. There's a lot of, speaking of physicality, that must have been just an incredible sequence to film. The one other thing I noticed that she had said about this production was that the music and the dancing were breaks for her. They were rewards for herself for kind of getting through the harder parts of this production. So she is a true triple threat: acting, singing, dancing. And for her, the music is an escape. And I think you and I as songwriters can both relate to that a little bit. We've got next in terms of billing, but not in terms of screen time. Kyle Gallner came back as Joel.
Yes.
He's the only actor who came back from the original film. There's just this really great continuity that comes from the end to the first. Kyle Gallner, as we talked about in our episode on Smile, has done a ton of horror throughout the 2000s and 2020s. Haunting in Connecticut, Jennifer's Body, Nightmare on Elm Street remake. He was in Scream 2022. And he also has a stage background, which I missed the first time around. He was King George III in Hamilton for like 6 years or something.
Wow.
So also multi-talented. Yeah, we only have Joel for the first 6 or 7 minutes of the film, I think. But man, does he do a great job. So that's Kyle Gallner. We've got Rosemary DeWitt, plays Sky's mother, Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
She's been in Rachel Getting Married in 2008, Your Sister's Sister, 2011. She was in Poltergeist in 2015.
Oh, I saw that.
Which I have not seen, but I wondered. And then she was also in La La Land. So
Heard of it.
Yeah. She played Candace Zamperini in The Staircase in 2022, which, didn't we see that? I thought we did. She also has a recurring role in The Boys as Daphne Campbell, which is a show that I would really like to watch, but haven't yet because there's too much other stuff on my list. We've got Lucas Gage as Louis Fragoli. He is in that show Euphoria, which I also haven't watched, and The White Lotus and You. So a lot of more recent.
All of the popular TV shows?
All of the popular TV shows.
I haven't watched because I'm not that young.
Precisely. The role was written specifically for Gage as an actor. He and Finn were friends. And so Finn wanted someone who could land the intensity and the dark comedy that the part needed. And I think it's fair to say that Gage nailed both of those really, really well. And there's a great article about the transformation. He went through the prosthetic transformation for his death scene, which is horribly vivid and interesting. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about special effects. But yeah, Lucas Gage did a great job as Louis. We've got relatively a short amount of screen time, but important character. Ray Nicholson plays Paul Hudson, Skye's boyfriend who died in the car crash. He is, of course, the son of Jack Nicholson and Rebecca Broussard. He's been in a ton of things, including Licorice Pizza, 2021, Promising Young Woman in 2020. I'm not sure if this is true or not. I saw this, but I don't know if it's true, that the casting itself is reportedly a deliberate nod to his father's Jack Torrance in The Shining. There are a few places where this reminds one of The Shining. And one thing is Parker Finn is, in all of the articles and interviews I read about him, that he really likes classic horror and so is obviously very influenced by it. So, I mean, even when he stands up and is smiling at her at the charity speech, he looks a lot like his dad.
Yeah, which obviously he can't help. What I do appreciate is I feel like he's probably capable of doing like a good impression of his father. And he doesn't do that at all.
No, exactly. Exactly. He just plays himself, but does it well. That echo is there. But he was a great casting choice for the creepy boyfriend. And then we've got Dylan Galula, which I think is how you pronounce it, who plays Gemma, Skye's best friend. She is known for Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt and Horse Girl, other things I haven't seen. She is the one person in Skye's circle who sees her as a real person, who doesn't kind of like simp to her or suck up to her or want something from her. This is someone who clearly really cares about her, although we'll talk about the character a little more later. But yeah, that's Dylan Galula. We've got Raul Castillo as Darius. He was in Army of the Dead.
Oh.
He's the head of Skye's record label in this movie. And then Miles Gutierrez Riley plays Joshua, her assistant, known for The Wilds and Agatha All Along, neither of which I am familiar with. I feel like these newer movies are tough, man, because I don't know these new actors. I'm like, they're in a stuff that I saw stuff about, but, you know, let's talk to me about some 80s actors. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Anyway, Peter Jacobson plays Morris. Morris is, of course, kind of like the one who tells Skye what's going on, maybe. And then Drew Barrymore plays herself, which I feel like is worth an open. She interviews Skye on a talk show segment, which serves as a great piece of exposition, as you pointed out. And also, of course, Drew Barrymore, the opening victim in Scream from 1996. There's a lot of, again, I feel like there are some nods and connections to classic horror, famous horror, that makes sense, knowing that Parker Finn is a horror fan.
Well, and what's funny is after we watched Smile 2, because we watched it in 2 parts.
We did.
After we watched the first part, I watched Fight Club.
Oh.
Or at least sometime, but I guess.
This must have been after.
But there's a brief moment where it was funny because we had just seen that with Drew Barrymore, and I was thinking all of those things. And obviously Fight Club came out in the late 90s, and there's just a shot of like Life magazine, and Drew Barrymore's on the cover, and it just says Drew on it.
Oh, that's funny.
I was like, she's a cultural icon across the decades.
She sure is. She sure is. That's all I've got for cast.
They did such a great job. I watched way more terrible horror movies than you do.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times at the end of the night, sometimes I want to watch a movie, but I want to watch something that's shorter. And a lot of times I'll find a movie that I really think is going to be good, and then I save it to watch with you. I didn't used to do that, and maybe I'll stop, but that pushes me towards watching some of the lower budget fare, a lot of which is available on like Prime Video. Mm-hmm. And And that's great. Like, make your movies. I'm happy to watch some of them. Some of them have a lot of great things about them. But my point is, there's a huge difference between actors, which you might not think about it that much, especially if you're watching, if you don't watch as many movies as we might, especially bigger movies with big actors in them. Just the performances in this, really sell what's happening, because it would get campy really quickly if you had people who weren't able to pull off sort of that immersive storytelling as these performers did.
Yeah, agreed.
So, as we mentioned in our first Smile episode, after it became a hit, Finn signed a first look deal with Paramount in 2023, and the sequel was announced as entering pre-production the following month. And principal photography for this film took place in early 24 from like January to March, mostly around the Hudson Valley, New York region. And there are several filming locations, including Newburgh, Poughkeepsie, Wappingers Falls, Albany, Ellenville, New York, all of those New York, and then, of course, some exteriors in New York City. And Parker Finn said that the Hudson Valley had strong locations and interiors that could stand in for New York City. So, like, her apartment is not actually in New York City. That was filmed in the Hudson Valley. In terms of scale, and as sequels to successful original films often do, we're talking a much bigger scale. We had the bigger budget, bigger locations, more public spaces, more extras, more elaborate hallucination scenes. And as you mentioned, I just wanted to touch on a couple of the sequences that I found particularly interesting that might not necessarily all land in Murder Mayhem. Some of them do a little bit crossover, but the Drew Barrymore show sequence, Finn wrote that scene set in the Drew Barrymore show, and he sent her a personal note asking her to appear, and she agreed. And so they used her actual talk show set. I'm not sure if that show's still going, but at the time they filmed this, it was, and they filmed it there. So that really strengthens the celebrity world realism, making Skye feel like a real pop cultural figure, obviously. And as you mentioned, really gives you a quick dose of exposition that's needed and does it in such a tasteful way.
Yeah, very clever. Even though it is just like a here's what's happening, that's how you learn about celebrities in the real world, right?
Then there's the apartment dancer sequence, which I'm not sure. Did you cover some of this for special effects?
I did not. I was
Okay.
looking mostly at the prosthetics and stuff
Awesome.
and the VFX.
So this was one of Finn's favorite sequences in the film, I think both to film and how it turned out. It was shot over 2 days in upstate New York. The dancers included high-level performers who had worked with major pop stars like Beyonce and Doja Cat. So these are like top-of-the-line professional dancers. And Finn said that they wanted to discover Skye's choreography style and take it somewhere strange and dark for the sequence. And the cool thing is that all that wall scaling and dancer stacking elements were practical.
Oh, cool. I was wondering about that.
So there's that mirror hallway that they used really well in several sequences in the movie in Skye's apartment.
Mm-hmm.
But for that specific sequence, they had all these hidden handholds and footholds throughout the hallway so the dancers could climb, stack, and freeze and hold those positions. So there was nothing funny like that. But Finn described the whole process of that like choreographing a Cirque du Soleil from hell.
Very cool. And I said this to you too while we were watching, but it made me think of for Train to Busan, where the zombies were, a lot of their movement was choreographed. It was not, and there was a choreographer on set to get the zombies to move a certain way. And I think there is something about, and the same thing from the original Smile film where all the smiles were acting and not digitally enhanced. That's mostly true for this one as well. But I think it is that when human bodies do things that they are capable of, but that they don't usually do, that is somehow scarier than VFX making it look a certain way, right? I think that's why it was so effective, because you could see people actually moving their bodies like that.
Yeah, and in terms of why this sequence was kind of important to the film, and I'm sure you'll get into this in themes, they talk a lot about control in this movie. And so choreography is something that's very controlled, right? Something that you polish and you rehearse. It turn and is like one of the most important aspects of what Sky Riley's life is. And all of a sudden, all of that turns into something chaotic, predatory, and supernatural. So it really shifts that on its head, which is cool. Like, I'm not a dancer, but I still appreciate it, and it definitely works.
I also think that I wouldn't have appreciated dance quite as much before having some children in dancing for a couple years and having seen many, many, many dancers on stage over the last 4 or 5 years.
We should have them do a creepy dance.
I bet they'd be totally into that.
Yeah, probably.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Scare themselves. And then the last sequence I just wanted to mention before vibe check is the final arena sequence. And those arena scenes were shot at MVP Arena in Albany, New York, doubling for Madison Square Garden. One interesting thing that I saw is it's like a 17,000 person arena, but they only had 500 extras. So my understanding of it is that they'd shoot them in a segment. They would like shoot the whole shot with a certain section filled up or whatever. And then they would like map those all on top of each other, or I don't know the terminology.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
This sequence is like a perfect example of what Smile 2 is to the original Smile. The first Smile ends in a dilapidated house that has just meaning to this, a very personal meaning to our protagonist. And now in Smile 2, we're ending in an arena, very impersonal, very public. So it's the whole philosophy of this sequel basically in one location shift.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's well said.
But that's pretty much all I wanted to mention on production.
Cool. Sounds good. So now it's time for the vibes.
Yes, it is time for vibe check. Is that convincing? My low voice?
Yeah, super convincing.
Vibe check. I'll fix it in post.
Vibe check. Here we go, we're checking the vibes. Vibe check. Sounding good and looking real nice. Vibe check. How'd they make that guy unalive? Vibe check. It's better off without CGI. Vibe check. Listen on point and we're feeling fine. Vibe check. The slow burn is taking its time. Vibe check. Here we go, we're checking the vibes. Vibe check.
All right.
Okay, so I was thinking that we had alluded to this earlier, but that this might be a good spot for why we had to watch this movie in 2 sittings.
Oh, yeah. Since the vibes contribute to your deteriorating health.
That's so funny. Before we started watching the movie, to be fair, the movie didn't cause this, but I had been feeling some chest pain and tightness and some weird breathing stuff and heart stuff, which is not unusual for my health condition. I've had issues with this before, but this was new. And so when we sat down, I said, I'm not sure if this is going to work, but let's give it a try. Maybe it'll pass. And it did not pass. And so I ended up going to the emergency room halfway through this movie. But I will say that I was more afraid of what was going on in my heart than I was in the movie. So it actually made the movie less scary for me. I didn't tell them I'd been watching a scary movie when I went to the emergency room because I thought they were going to be like, oh, well, that's why. I'd be like, no, you don't get it. And this was before. But anyway, yeah, so I guess this movie sent me to the emergency room.
The good news is you're okay.
Oh, yeah, I'm totally fine. I'm very often fine, but I have to be extra careful with things like that because I could not be fine. So someday my caution will likely save my life. This time it didn't, but it's okay.
And we played a fun new game via text message that we'll be incorporating into future encores.
We did because John was keeping me distracted while I was waiting for test results to come back.
And I basically created a quiz based on my physical media collection because I have like an app that keeps track of it and keeps track of more stats than I even realized. So I was quizzing her about like actors and stuff.
Yeah, like which actor is in the most of the movies that you have.
Right.
Right?
Who makes the most appearances.
Yeah, which is a really fun game. And then you would give me little hints and it was fun. So, well, anyway, you got to have fun on the nights when you go to the emergency room, because what else are you going to do?
And I didn't take her because I had to stay with the child who was asleep.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I wasn't like, you go ahead now.
I do go to the emergency room more often than a regular person. So this is my third time, I think, in a year to be at the emergency room, all for different things. And I was fine all the time. But so it is we don't want you to worry. I regularly go to the emergency room.
Don't worry about that.
But don't worry about it. And the vibes of this movie were appropriate for that. So.
But not the cause.
But not the cause.
She kept reminding me that it started before the movie.
It did.
So I'm just going to have to take her word on that. Mm-hmm. All right. Cinematography. Again, one of the major contributors to the original Smile returns, Charlie Saroff. Saroff or Saroff? How are you saying it?
I think Saroff would be how I would say it.
All right. And so I'm not going to rehash his full biography, but I'm going to look just a little bit in terms of sort of his sequel philosophy and the evolution from the original Smile to the sequel. There's a great article in American Cinematographer that will be in the show notes that goes into a lot of detail. I'm not going to get into everything, but he basically kind of opened the interview saying that horror sequels often rinse and repeat, which I think is true for a lot of sequels. But he and Finn wanted to make Smile 2 only if they could push themselves and the film into a different space. It's something I think they succeeded on.
I agree. I think they did I think that's what makes this a successful sequel.
And I'm going to try not to repeat myself too many times, but across sort of these different mediums through which a film expresses itself, visual, sound, all of that, we kind of have some parallels. But the first Smile, visually, again, we're talking about now, was very clinical and controlled and isolated and intimate. A lot of natural light, if not even subdued natural light in a way. Just very, I guess clinical is the best. Sterile, almost.
Yeah.
The sequel is larger, much more saturated in terms of colors in a lot of ways, more theatrical and more public performance driven. So across all of those things, you've got some new challenges for our cinematographer. But one of the things that they made sure to do, they used the same camera as they used in the first film. And basically, because they still wanted it, even though they're incorporating all these new aspects and elements into the visuals, they wanted basically the baseline to be the same, right? And in terms of some of how, like the close-ups of some of the characters' faces, we saw that, plenty of times with Sky, but also thinking of like Lewis, some of the close-ups of his face before he smashed it. That was all very like consistent between the first movie and this movie. And I think it's so helpful. Not just the same director, but to have the same cinematographer. And he was saying in this article that, the first movie it was really the first big project they were working on together and were trying to figure each other out. And now they just had shorthand. So now it was less about figuring out how to work together, but how to achieve this newer, bigger thing that they were going for. Another big challenge, he said he lost sleep over the stage performances. And in terms of, because obviously the lighting and everything for that is way different, especially compared to when we're just talking about the Smile universe itself in terms of the cinematography. He basically had to light and shoot arena level pop performances in addition to private horror sequences. And I think he worked with somebody who has a lot of experience in stage lighting and all of that, and they figured it out. And this article went into it at way more technical level than my brain could handle today. He also cited some of his influences going into this movie, which I thought was interesting. The first is a street photographer named Luke Cordes, and he's known for New York and urban street photography. He often shoots crowded spaces, but also loneliness inside cities and just people observed in public, much more like candid kind of photos. The second photographer is a more fine art photographer named Gregory Crewdson, who's known for highly staged cinematic images of ordinary American spaces that make them feel uncanny or frozen. And I did check out some of these photos from both of those guys. And it really is interesting to see the difference. And then lastly, he cited Edward Hopper, who's the painter. You've seen his most famous work called Nighthawks, which is people like in a city diner, but it's kind of like uncanny, almost like liminal people sitting around an old-timey bar. People out there know what I'm talking about. But Edward Hopper is famous for loneliness, isolation, and people separated from one another inside public or semi-public spaces. So all three references point toward isolation, which is interesting because Skye is surrounded by people almost constantly, yet she's horribly isolated in her terror and everything she's experiencing. And even so before the monstrosity really weighs in, right? I mean, just being in the public eye like that and taking on the pressure of the industry that's being sort of forced upon her, it seems like at times by her handlers and her label and everything, get back into it after you've gone through this horrible tragedy, is very isolating, I think, for someone. And I think, we don't get to see it in the detail we see in this movie, but I think we hear stories that make us wonder about what some of the younger stars particularly are experiencing as they traverse the journey of stardom.
Yeah, we'll talk about that more in a little bit.
Good point.
For sure.
Good, because...
We got a whole section on isolation.
Nice.
I had a ton of notes about particular shots like I did in the first one.
Oh, that you liked?
Yeah, the cold open, the sequence with Joel where he falls out of the window and then the shootout and then that whole thing was really, really cool. From the start, you're like, oh.
That was all a oneer.
Was it? Did you go back and confirm? I thought it was.
I know it's a one. I did not confirm whether or not they used like hidden cuts.
Right,
but it
was
shot like a oneer at least. Yeah. And I think it might have been.
It was really a neat way to start. And also, I don't remember there being anything quite like that in the first one. So already from the start, even just the camera work is telling us that this is different, this is bigger, it's wider, it's broader, even though we were in a small place, right? The centering and the decentering of characters in the shot, I noticed a lot more. When Skye goes to investigate the shattered glass, and then the camera kind of goes off axis. It's not head on, right? So there's some, and I don't know if you could trace the shots through and be like, oh, here she's hallucinating or here she's not. But there's this questioning of reality is a lot more there. But also, most people who see this movie have seen the first one. So we know that there is a false reality potential happening, which we don't know in the first one, the first time we see it. And so I think they know we know. So we know they know we know, which means we're kind of playing a little bit. There was one shot where Skye and Gemma are sitting in her apartment and Skye's like all in black and Gemma was in white and we're looking at them through the window. And I thought that was very purposeful, like mirror image. There's a lot of mirror images. You talked about the mirror hallway, right?
Mirrors, reflections is the next word on my paper.
There it is. Yep. So I have a bunch of Lewis appearing as a reflection behind her in a mirror shot, mirroring, doubling. So I saw a lot of those things. As someone who does not notice as much about these things, it was more clear to me this time around.
Well, and it's interesting, the mirror thing in the sense that, the image is really important for a celebrity, obviously, for better or worse. You're expected, there's the self-expectation and the public expectation of how you are presenting yourself. There's also like self-surveillance, especially somebody who's been through what Skye's been through, both very public fallout from addiction, the death of her movie star boyfriend in a terrible crash that she had to not only physically recover from, but also mentally recover from, which is a much longer journey than she's been given the time to do.
Seriously.
So the mirror is important for that, for like the literal like looking at yourself. But then also the monstrosity feeds on all of that, feeds on all your weaknesses and your trauma and sort of the mirror image of yourself in a sense, which is also then sort of played on with the double of her in the freezer too.
Oh, yeah.
The other interesting thing, and I'm going to let you take over on special effects here, but in terms of some of the movies they looked at before they started filming, not necessarily they weren't trying to achieve what was achieved visually in these films, but they just wanted to see how these similar themes were kind of dealt with. The first one that Saroff talked about is Black Swan, which I thought was, makes sense. It's kind of a similar, you have not a pop star, but
high achieving performer
in the public eye trying to achieve. You got dealing with very personal unraveling of sorts. But then they also looked at the 2018 remake of Suspiria. And there's a French movie called Climax that you haven't seen. There was one other that was specifically mentioned. I can't remember at the moment. I'm pulling them from my brain, but I just thought that was interesting. I always think it's neat to hear kind of what movies they were thinking of. And there were lots of mirrors in Black Swan from my recollection. So
it's been a while, but yeah.
But that's all I had on cinematography for today. So cool. I'm interested to hear about these effects.
Yeah, the effects, there was not many in the first one because, again, smaller budget and a lot of it. But Parker Finn, big fan of the old school horror movies, really big fan of practical. And so we've got the prosthetic makeup designer Jeremy Sellenfriend returned. He was also on the original. So again, bringing back the crew. He worked alongside special effects supervisor Johann Kuntz and visual effects supervisor Robert Beck. Hopefully I've written all of these down next to the proper title. So like in the first movie, every smile is a real unaugmented expression. So I suppose that could be a fun video sometime as us practicing our smiles. There was some digital tweaking, mostly just to lock faces in place, but not enhance them, to kind of hold them in place while other things are happening. The actors had to hold an extreme smile through the life casting process, which I thought was interesting. There were 4 prosthetic studios that contributed. Millennium FX did digital scans of Naomi Scott. Morphology handled life casting, and Studio Gillis and Alec Gillis built the entity for the original film. They returned for the new creations. So very similar. There was this great, again, article about the weight plate scene with Lewis's death. And so there were 3 escalating sculpted stages. So, because remember, he hits himself 3 times. So each time he pulls the weight plate off his face, it is more crushed. There was a puppeteered cheek flap rig that was pulling on a filament on his face. And then the final one was a CG hybrid that was showing the skull underneath. So there were practical effects, puppeteering, and VFX all stacked in one continuous shot. They used MMA fight references to figure out, like, what would a face look like if you smashed it with a plate like this? Oh, and Jeremy Sellenfriend, when there's a quick flash of Morris's brother ripping his own face off with a crowbar, that is Jeremy Sellenfriend, the prosthetics designer.
Like the actual person?
Yeah, the brother. So I guess that was his cameo.
Nice.
Yeah, and his work as well.
Kind of like when we watched Tom Savini blow up his own head.
Exactly.
In Maniac.
Yes, that was so good. The mouth stretching hallucination, where the entity is pulling her mouth open and we go in. So Rodeo Effects handled this set piece, and this is where Finn wanted VFX supervisor Robert Beck to build it from 3 separate practical stages, but Beck did convince him to go full CG so that the stretch could read continuously instead of having kind of the uncanny valley between moving between different ones. Rodeo Effects also worked on the Stranger Things creatures CG takeovers.
Ooh.
So, I mean, I think that as you get more ambitious in a movie like this and with creatures, then you start bringing in CG. And thank goodness we've reached a point where you can't tell the difference a lot of the time these days. People sitting at home can make music videos that look like they're real people. And so we can make crazy face-stretching monsters that look real. I like it. The eye gore effect, like the big eyeball with the stretchy. What kind of food do you think that was made out of?
You mean like Sky's Double's eyes? The hypnotizing eyes?
Like the big eyeball eyes that kind of came out. I don't even remember. I remember what the eye looked like.
I'm going to say goat's eyes.
Nope, it was a peeled lychee.
Oh, I was actually originally going to say grape, which would have been closer.
Very close. And then they had prosciutto fat for the optic nerve and connective tissue.
Delicious.
Yeah, really good, right? It cost about $40, and then they could eat it at the end of the day.
That would be probably a good combination. Some like salty and sweet.
Yeah. All right. Lychee and prosciutto eyeballs for our next party. The dancing, which you already covered. I did have a note, but I didn't go into as much depth. One thing I couldn't find specifically, well, there were two things that I had written notes about, and we can talk about them, but I didn't find answers for. When she chugs all that water, how does she do that without burping? Like a lot every time.
I mean, it's still water.
Right, but still, she's drinking it so fast. You're telling me no air got down there.
They also might just cut around it.
That's true. Maybe like she drinks it, they burp, she burps, and then they go back to it. I don't know. Anyway.
I don't get as burpy with regular water. I'm not
Well,
sure
certainly, I mean, she drinks that water real fast. And I'm guessing she really did it. It was not fake. So, and then the other thing, the arm going down her throat in that dancing scene, I'm not sure. I couldn't find anything specifically about it, like how they did that. Like it must have been CG at one point. Like it switched at some point, right? But that was the only one.
Let's hope so.
There's some videos on the internet. That's it. That's it for special effects. Definitely, bigger budget, bigger scope, more effects, but still with a real deep respect and rootedness in the practical effects that we love so much and that Parker Finn does too.
Excellent.
Cool.
That takes us into music and sound design. And like you mentioned before, and you said much better than I'm going to, Cristobal Tapia de Ver returns as the composer for the score. Lakeshore Records released the Smile 2 score on October 25th, 2024. So you can get that out there. And I'm not going to go... He had a really interesting history, actually, if I'm remembering correctly. So check that out. The cool thing about his work is that his score it's different. He's got a unique style. And a lot of a lot of people describe it as sort of almost like sound design merged with score, right? Basically.
Oh, yeah.
He uses a lot of like sounds in his music, which might sound obvious, but I don't mean like musical sounds.
Right.
It's really focused on causing dread and distortion and psychological unease. And he continued right with that. I mean, I really noticed it in the opening sequence with Joel. I was like, okay, here we go. Not only were we moving really quickly, which is different from the first movie, but it was kind of tied in by the fact that we're continuing the story from the first movie, but the sound design, and the score in that sequence was very, very like big Smile music, I'll call it. But Smile 2 has a more complicated sound world. There's the horror score, then there's the in-universe pop songs, which includes like the rehearsal music and all of that. There's arena performance sound, crowd noise, backstage ambiance. Really, the first movie has very little, like, groups of people.
Yeah, it's sparse.
And so now all of a sudden we're in the city and following somebody who's surrounded by people a good percentage of the time. Cristobal kind of returned to what he did in the first movie very well. And they just went a bit bigger, kind of like everything else. But what I was really interested in looking at was the Sky Riley music and the pop songs.
I knew you would.
And today I listened to Smile 2, the Sky Riley EP, which you can get wherever you stream music. It was released by Interscope Records on October 11th, 2024. And it functions as an in-universe pop release by Sky Riley. All of the songs are performed by Naomi Scott. It has, 5 tracks and then a 6th track, which is the piano version of a song called Just My Name, which is the one that she plays sitting at the piano there. They kind of used this aspect of the film in their marketing, which I wish I had been paying a little bit more attention to the sort of the horror-scape at that time, because maybe I would have caught on to it. But there's like a fictional, it's a real Instagram account called Sky Riley Nation. It began teasing a new era for Sky Riley in June of 2024. The song Blood on White Satin was released on June 18th, 2024. So all of this is before the movie comes out. That song was also featured in the trailer. And then Grieved You followed as a second single on September 13th. So they released 2 pop singles before the movie even came out.
Huh.
like a lot of pop music today, there's, some of these songs have a list of a few songwriters, but there's basically two main songwriters that I can see as like sort of the central figures in the songwriting. The first person I'm going to talk about is David Biral, Biral, who is half of the songwriting duo Take a Day Trip, the other half being Denzel Baptiste. And I couldn't confirm whether Baptiste was involved with this as well, but Biral is a songwriter and producer, and Take a Day Trip has worked with major contemporary pop and hip hop artists like Lil Nas X, Travis Scott, Doja Cat, and Jack Harlow. They were involved in the first song on the album, which is called Grieved You. That's the only song on this that I can see that they're the lead songwriter. But then for the other 4 or 5 songs, the lead songwriter, at least like in Spotify, they're credited to Alexis Ida Rose Kesselman, sometimes just professionally goes by Ida Rose. She's a songwriter, producer, and artist. She basically did the rest of the songs and is really could be attributed or could be credited for being one of the main architects of Sky Riley's musical identity. There's a really great article really about the music in this movie and Naomi Scott talking about it. When she came into the project, there were about 3 of these songs were already written for the most part. And so 2 of them were written by Ida Rose and were demoed by her. And so Ida Rose had, sung what she had written. And I guess Scott really based kind of Riley's pop voice around Ida Rose's voice in those demos. Like you said, then Naomi Scott collaborated on some of the other songs, specifically that piano song, Just My Name, which she talked about how she co-wrote that with Ida Rose over Zoom. Ida Rose was in New York on a piano. Scott was in London on a piano, and they wrote that over Zoom. It sounds like not that long after she had been hired for the role. So they really kind of dove into this. A lot of it was kind of done before the movie was shot, but specifically the end credit song, which is called Death of Me, was the one that was written after, which Scott said it was fun to then be able to write a song knowing so much more about her character and having that be the big pop finale song over the end credits.
Speaking of that big pop finale song over the end credits, halfway through it just turns to screams, right?
I mean, that's what my songs do.
Yeah, that's true.
But obviously the attention to these songs were really integral in creating Sky Riley as a believable celebrity, which I thought this movie just was so good at that. Like she makes for a great pop star. The songs are good and believable and just supports the film's world building. I mean, they just basically had to invent a pop star that was convincing enough that horror could destroy her. Success.
Hooray.
In terms of the sound design, we have Dan Kenyon, who we didn't talk about last time, I don't think. He was credited as supervising sound editor and sound designer, and he worked on the first Scream. I keep almost saying Scream, just a 1-syllable S word that's a horror movie. He did not work on the original Scream, or if he did, that's not what I'm here to talk about. He worked on the original Smile. I think he also worked on Laura Hasn't Slept, or whatever that short was that they made. So he's really been kind of working on sound design for Parker Finn's movies since the get-go, it sounds like. There's like 19 other people in the sound department listed on IMDb. But again, like the visuals, there was a huge shift from the first film to the second film because instead of empty rooms, clinical spaces, domestic unease, and private dread, you've now shifted to crowds, dancers, rehearsals, talk shows, fans, arenas, backstage spaces. And there's a really detailed article about Kenyon's work on this film. And he really talks a lot about how his sound design had to interact with Tapia de Ver's sound design like score. So it was really interesting to read about that and how they sort of approached intermingling those things. One of the parts of the article that really stood out to me was he talked about how they really like to creep up on you in such a way that you don't really realize how intense it's become until they strip it away real quick.
When she pulls her hair out.
Exactly. The team of the sound design and score and music I would imagine it was a tough balancing act to pull it off at the level to which they did.
Yeah, for sure.
That's all for vibes, man.
Cool.
This
All right.
movie's high on the vibes, but it's time we check out the story.
Let's do it.
Story time. Story time. Okay.
All right, you ready for this?
Dun 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 dun.
Is that a real song?
I think. Are you ready for this?
Oh, got it.
I think.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. That's not
Sorry.
what I was thinking. I didn't know if you were making up a song on the spot. Let's get into it. We've got Sky Riley, who we've talked about a lot already, but she is Grammy-winning pop star relaunching her career a year after a deadly car crash and stint in rehab. A lot of people saw Sky as a stand-in for Britney Spears, although that was not originally. There were other pop stars that Finn drew on, but I think a lot of people saw Britney in this portrayal, which makes sense because she has had a lot of public fallout in her career and personal life. When the film opens, Sky is promising on Drew not to misbehave again. So the whole movie is just her trying to prove that she's okay when she's very clearly not okay. And the people closest to her are who should see, her mother in particular, who we'll get to, but they don't see it and they let her down. Did you see the devil tattoo behind Sky's ear?
I saw there was a tattoo, but not specifically what it was.
It was like a devil whispering in her ear. So kind of, a hint of the person that she was or the person that she is left behind after going through rehab. She had some really great lines. And it's interesting because I teach a writing class, and in that we talk a lot about recovery sometimes. And I think that there's a lot in this movie about recovery and about addiction. And she really puts voice to the thoughts that I think are inside of a lot of people's heads who do struggle with addiction. She says, I don't know why I destroy everything. I feel like my brain is this really fucked up place full of chaos and noise. That's just the beginning. There was more to that quote, but it's just she has learned this whole toolkit for managing her pain and distress instead of using, right? So she has breathing exercises, grounding techniques where she's kind of like touching the center of her chest. She's grounding, that guzzling of the water bottles. She has worked so hard to build up a structure to deal with her pain and her sadness and her shame and her lack of self-worth, and none of it works once the entity gets inside her head. So recovery becomes kind of a weapon. Like her mom is like, the only way you can quit this tour is if you're going back to rehab. That's why she used in the first place, right? Sky is stuck, and she is a dry drunk if ever I saw one, right? And if you're not familiar with that term, a dry drunk is somebody an alcoholic who may not be drinking alcohol, but still hasn't faced a lot of the reasons why they drink, and so are still having lots of problems in their personal relationships or in their behaviors, maybe doing other things that are self-destructive. And Sky needed to go to some meetings.
Jack Torrance, another great example.
Yes, we have discussed this. Jack Torrance, another dry drunks who's not drinking, but still has not kind of gotten to the why beneath the drinking. And so it is inevitable that he eventually will. Another really big point that we haven't talked about yet, but when we have the flashback to the crash and we find out she's the reason the car crashed.
Yeah.
So not only she's playing out this very public recovery, and everyone probably thinks that it was her boyfriend who crashed the car. And he did. And he was also coked up. So both of them shouldn't have been driving. But she knows that she's the one that turned the wheel, and that maybe they would have not gone through that if she hadn't lost control of her feelings, which is what happened, lost control of her anger, And to be fair, he was being a total dick at the time, right? But she was completely out of control. And so she is dealing with the guilt from that alone. Bet you $1,000,000 she didn't tell anybody about that, not even Gemma. Like, and that's why she hates herself, because she feels like she's a horrible person. And until you can kind of exercise those demons, they continue to ride you, especially when substance abuse is part of the picture. So she's not just... Rose was really an innocent victim who thought she was guilty of killing her mom because she didn't help her mom when her mom was ODing, right? So Rose carried guilt that really wasn't her. She was a child who was put in a situation. Sky's not, it's not quite as clear, except Sky was pushed to that, right? And yet still there's choice and responsibility and all that. So she's at war with herself even before the curse even shows up. So, of course, the entity is like, oh, this is feast day. And one of the lines she says, every good thing in my life ends up broken because of me. So this is something that Sky really believes about herself, which makes her susceptible to the entity's manipulations. But anything else on Sky?
No.
We've talked a lot about her, but
Yeah.
like she is, I mean, that is one of the amazing things. This movie is so wide in scope, and yet we learn so much about this character. I can see why the actress was so excited to play her. It really must have been a fascinating character. We've got Rosemary DeWitt playing Elizabeth Riley, Sky's mother. Okay.
The momager.
The momager, who I don't like. Right at the very beginning, Sky's mom says, you should feel really good about today, which seems innocuous unless you have a mother like this or know a mother like this. You should really feel good about it. She's telling Sky exactly how to feel. She dismisses Sky's actual feelings repeatedly throughout the movie. She manages Sky's image. She pours the pressure on top. When Sky oversleeps and misses the night that Gemma spends the night, or does she? The night that Gemma sleeps over and she's late for rehearsal the next day, and her mom comes in, she's like, there are 100 people waiting for you. Like, not, are you okay? Daughter of mine who almost died in a car accident and now is acting strange again? Like, no, it's, oh, there's all these people who are upset with you. When Sky wakes up in the like private rehabilitation center and touches her face and realizes that she has a black eye from when all the dancers were in her room, and her mom says, we can cover that with makeup. She doesn't even tell her that she's been injured. She's like, again, goes straight to like, what does this mean for your image? What does this mean for what you've worked for? And she's like, oh, you get to be here for a whole day before your before your first show. Like, oh, how generous. Your daughter is clearly in trouble, even if you don't know that there is a demon inside of her brain. She is exploiting Sky. And I don't even know if it's for the money. I think for moms like this, for dance moms, stage moms, I mean, Sky's mom is a stage mom, right? Like their daughter's image is everything for them. And then in that final scene, when Sky looks and sees Darius and Joshua and her mother all standing in the front row, and her mom goes, smile, right? Like that last moment, very innocuous, but it's not, obviously. That's a choice. So that's Elizabeth. We don't like her. And when she stabs herself in the face, don't feel too sad for her. That's not nice. But that didn't happen, so it's okay. I can feel that way. Louis Frigoli, then old high school acquaintance turned drug dealer. Kind of an interesting relationship that we learn about, right? That they went to high school together. And so, yeah, Sky was just a normal person who went to high school and then somehow rocketed to superstardom.
That was an interesting thing throughout the movie to think about. Just celebrities as real people, which we tend to forget about. Like the general we tend to forget about. And to see somebody balancing sort of being superstar with like personal relationships, I thought was an interesting aspect to it. But
yeah, no, really good point. And Lewis shows us that part of her, right? That she had a past and a connection, and Gemma was part of that past too. And yet Sky, before the demon, was a total dick to her friends, right? And so Lewis was also someone who she, used for what she needed, which was Vicodin, which it is crazy to me that like a super pop star, the only way she could get opiates would be to like go to a high school drug dealer she knew since high school.
But I guess her handlers, and especially since her mom is one of her main handlers, makes it hard to go the main route.
There would just be so many people interested in helping her. You know what I mean? Like there's always, and this is what I've heard about people being famous, is you don't know who your friends are because everyone's just so kind of wanting to be near you and they don't know who you are. But I just imagine it would be very easy to get people to do things like that for you. But it's okay.
He was the
It
first
works.
person who came to mind.
Right, exactly. And really, really cool that we get like the video of Lewis afterwards of him and kind of confirming what Skye is seeing. And then, he shows up as a double a few times later for the hallucinations. We've got Gemma, Skye's best friend. She is the one like non-suck up in Skye's circle. Like when she shows up and before we start sucking each other's dicks, what's going on? Like, she's like, no more bullshit. She's fine. I still am not convinced that we ever actually see Gemma. We can talk about that at the myths part. But
I've come up with more evidence for my theory.
okay, cool. I hope so because I like Gemma a lot and I want her. And I think we're supposed to like Gemma. And I think Skye likes Gemma. And that's what makes it such a tragedy when the creature starts wearing her face later on. That doubling shot of Skye and Gemma, I think that's really important. I think that Gemma shows maybe who Skye would have been if she hadn't been pulled into celebrity, right? And Gemma represents for Skye who she was or who she could have been. And so I like Gemma a lot as a character, and I wish we had more of her.
Well, and we get to see the true, maybe that's kind of what you were saying, but we get to see the true Skye because of Gemma in a way, because we see, obviously Skye cares about her best friend very much.
Yeah.
And when she first comes to visit, she's apologizing and all of that. Now, to be fair, Skye has had a very terrifying night that when they awake the next morning.
Yes.
So she's probably pretty on edge, and she's realized she's super late and that everybody's going to be pissed at her. Mm-hmm. But she very quickly kind of is like a little like forceful with Gemma, being like, I need you to come with me. Like, I need you to like come on tour. And Gemma's like, I have another obligation. Like,
right. And she is used to people doing what she says because she's surrounded by all these yes men who are also controlling her. And so I think that that's what people need in their lives when they become super famous, right? And I think of the celebrities that you hear about who don't go crazy and lose it, many of them, either their parents like maintained a normalcy for them in their lives, or they had parents who kind of like protected them from that instead of playing into it. And the ones that don't do well, a lot of times they were not protected from it and they didn't have anyone kind of anchoring them to reality. So really interesting. Joshua, Skye's assistant, he brings her a sweatshirt in the moment when she's I noticed that he was like, oh, I brought you this sweatshirt. I think he really cares about Skye.
yeah.
He seems like he really cares about her, even when she's like screaming at him and accusing him of destroying her room, which he didn't. But he's still part of this machinery that's keeping her down. Morris, which is just a cool character, kind of at a little bit of a like Deus Ex Machina who comes out of the woodwork, right? Like, oh, that's handy that someone comes and tells you. But I suppose how else would Skye find out? Rose finds out because she's got Joel, who's a cop, right? Who can go look up for her and make these connections. And Skye's not going to have that freedom. So some random person finding her cell phone number on Lewis's phone, I guess that makes sense. I can forgive it. It's pretty cool.
I think I've seen this movie 3 times now in total, and that was the weakest part to me the first time I watched it, and it has grown on me since then. His role, especially based on the theory that I've come up with on where we split from reality and how he fits into that, because I do think I think that bar scene is real.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the fact that he was like in conversation with Lewis about everything, or because he had seen the video online or whatever, and it was Lewis, and that he found her. Like he seems to have we know he has a personal connection to the whole thing because of his brother. So it would make sense that he might be trying to put an end to it all.
Yeah, makes sense. Darius, head of the record label, obviously doesn't care about Skye as a person. He like represents corporate pressure, and he operates through Joshua and Elizabeth more than he operates himself. But then at one point when he shows up and she's got the gun in the hall of the spa, and he's like, think about the tour. And she goes, fuck the tour, which is like what she should have said before, right? Like clearly this young woman is not ready for this, and all the people who are supposed to help her, all they can see is this image. which is the deep tragedy of this beyond the, supernatural parasitic demon. Two more characters that we run into. Joel, returning from the first film, he tries really hard to beat the curse and yet somehow doesn't, right? He's trying to pass it on to like a horrible murderer by killing his brother in front of him, but instead passes it on to poor Lewis and then to Skye. And what has he been through in those 6 days? Like, what would you, if you knew from the start that you were infected with this, how would that change your experience of it? I wonder. Something to think about. Like what he knew exactly as soon as he saw her burning, as soon as he saw Rose kill herself, he knew what was going on. And actually, Rose's on fire corpse appears in front of him as he's walking in, right? So did he just ignore it the whole time? Is he in conversation with the demon? And then he gets hit by a car, which is just the worst.
Squished.
It sucks. And then Paul Hudson, killed in the car crash that Skye caused. So we don't see a lot of him. We have that one scene in the car where we really see how they interacted, and they hated each other, which of course they did. Yeah, super sad. But those are all the characters that we see and a little bit about them. What about murder, mayhem?
And myths? Question mark? I'm going to try to go about this a little bit differently. I'm trying not to make this section be just like a plot review, which plenty of podcasts do that and it works out great. But that wasn't my intention when I started this. Sometimes, depending on how the murder and mayhem unfold, it kind of lends itself more toward that. But like for slashers, I feel like you end up doing a bit of a plot thing, which is fine because those plots are so silly.
Is plot just what happens one after another?
Yes.
And story is like the arc?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I teach creative writing.
Well, that's one of the tougher things. Yeah, plot.
I still have a hard time wrapping my mind around it. Yeah. And so with Murder Mayhem, you're not trying to just hit each plot point.
Right.
Right.
So core structure, we talked about this with the last Smile, and it is very similar, which I appreciate. The curse still passes through witnessed suicide or murder, and the victim experiences hallucinations, reality collapse, isolation, and a forced public and or private breakdown. The witness becomes next in line. And really, like you were just mentioning, there's the opening Joel sequence, the direct continuation of Smile. Joel's trying to offload the curse. His plan spirals into violent chaos, does not go as planned, but we think he still has eked it out until he gets eked out in the pavement. Lewis just happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Apparently he comes to these dealers for their stash, right? So he can deal it. I forget how, it doesn't matter. But Joel's basically in the 6 days that you're talking about. I would imagine that because he has the foreknowledge, he's trying to think of the best way to unload this curse without having to end his own life. And presumably he's like a little bit ahead of it, right? Like he's not quite to the point.
He doesn't seem as crazy as Rose did at the end.
Right. He's got a clear intention. He's picked this house where he knows that there's these higher up dealers who have probably done terrible things. And he's going to kill one in front of the other and pass the curse that way. But it turns into a shootout. They all die. Joel gets shot a little bit. But poor Lewis, who's coming in to like re-up his own stash for selling. I don't know the terminology.
That's okay. It just means you were never a drug dealer.
He becomes the unintended witness, and obviously it passes on to him. And the importance really of this whole sequence is it establishes the sequel's not just ignoring the first movie, but it also clears the board for Skye's story. It's one aspect of this that I really appreciate. The fact that it's not just Joel. Like the sequel could have been just Joel's story, right?
Right.
I like how they didn't do that. They went somewhere else. And in terms of like franchises in general, I like that idea. It makes it more of anthology franchise in a way, because it's all can be in the same universe, but it doesn't have to be continuing characters. Like we don't have a final girl that's surviving from movie to movie, or like side characters who are...
Or like Camp Crystal Lake. Like it's the same location over and over again.
Right.
Like it really allows you to have it is kind of interesting in that it takes you from the core is still there. We know what happens, but it could go anywhere from here.
Right.
And it could follow any of the people that watched, right? Because there's only one demon, supposedly.
Because that's what, like, John Carpenter wanted that for the Halloween franchise. After Halloween 2, which we'll get into someday, he went with Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, no Michael Myers, which upset everybody at the time, but has gotten a massive reevaluation since then. But he wanted it to basically be a different story that takes place on Halloween every year, sort of in the same universe. Some crazy supernatural thing sometimes. It doesn't necessarily, but he didn't succeed at that. People wanted Michael Myers. But this universe is kind of open for anything, like you're saying. One of the next major sequences, obviously, is Skye going for her Vicodin at the apartment of said Lewis. And the scene ties the curse almost to relapse anxiety, right? She's really been facing this pressure because they just had that dance rehearsal where she's experienced this pain all of a sudden.
Yes. And I would say that as someone who has done a lot of looking at trauma and pain and healing and the body, that the fact that Skye's body is telling her to stop is also a sign. Not that there's anything wrong, but like the body, if you are under psychological stress and you ignore the signs, very often you will end up with a headache or a stomach ache or a backache because your brain's just like, I got to get them to slow down. And so this does not mean that pain is all in your head, because all pain's in your head because pain is in the brain. But what it does mean to me, as soon as Skye starts hurting, it's like, oh yeah, not that there's something still wrong with her, but like nobody's listening to her. She's not listening to herself. Like I thought that was really well done. Also, she doesn't do the cocaine at Lewis's house, even though she really wants to.
And there's plenty of it.
And there's a lot of it. She could have done but she's not. She's like, no, just the Vicodin. Like, just give me the Vicodin.
Yeah, she's trying.
Poor Skye, man.
But this scene so obviously this scene basically concludes with Lewis, who is the host for the monstrosity, killing himself in front of Skye, making her the new host. The contagion has passed to her. But not only is it, that important plot point, but there's also a lot of really good character development in this scene as well. Like you were just talking about. And so there's the relapse anxiety, the drug context, but also we see some of her shame, her private shame that she's trying to work through and trying to hide from everybody else. That's all tied to her unstable personal history. And even when she's like waiting for him to like go get the pills or whatever, there's like the story of her on, one of the tabloid shows or whatever. And just seeing how she even has to see her own life as it's portrayed in the media, which is probably not completely the same as it is in her own experience. And so the curse enters Skye's life through a private, compromised moment. And it gives the entity huge leverage over Skye's public image and her recovery. Because as we know, the monstrosity preys on the weaknesses and the traumas, and it's got a lot to work with here.
Yep.
Throughout all of this, she's having some Paul Hudson hallucinations, we'll call them. The entity repeatedly weaponizes Skye's guilt over the fatal crash involving Paul, which, like you said, we find out later she had a lot more fault in that than you might imagine or than anyone else knows. It's really the sequel's major trauma engine. And the hallucinations connect her addiction and guilt, her survivor trauma, and celebrity scandal. But really, the hallucination that is the major one is the one at that child's fundraiser.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden she's calling up, based on the teleprompter, her dead ex-husband, which, eventually leads to her in the real world, or we're saying the real world, at least by my theory, to knocking that old lady off the stage.
Pretty great.
Through the table, which she had begged her mom not to make her do
Yes.
that. She was like, I cannot do that. Like, I am struggling. Nope. She had to do it. So this, really starts her public deterioration through industry pressure. She has to keep functioning in public. She's got the rehearsals. There's that rehearsal scene, like the dress rehearsal on stage, where she sees, who does she hallucinate in that at some point?
I thought it was Paul.
Yeah, I think it was too. And then that's when she thinks her leg's been re-broken.
Yep.
Like we see the compound fracture, very nicely done, and he freaks out at everybody, blames her dancers, and then the choreographer comes up and very gently.
They all think she's batshit, which is like, again.
So this kind of all ties back to the first film isolating Rose because people don't believe what's happening to Rose. The second one isolates Sky because she cannot publicly fall apart. She has to maintain this image as best as she can. So every little crack that shows really makes her have to sort of go more inward in a sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah.
And then, of course, the apartment dancers sequence that we talked about before. The dancers appear in her apartment. Well, actually, it's actually that fan appears in her apartment first. That part's really creepy.
Wicked creepy.
From the meet and greet, she has a fan who later on is naked and running at her in an apartment. Anytime there's something that's like still and then starts running at somebody, that always kind of gets me. But then similarly, later on, that's really the precursor to the apartment dancers. And they seem to like grow in number, these dancers. This is right after she's like thrown a fit in the bathroom, smashed the shower. She's packing up to get the hell out of there, but these monsters will not let her go. And so all of a sudden the choreography turns predatory in her own personal space. Professional movement becomes monstrous, and then the scene escalates into a bodily spatial invasion where she gets her head smashed on the piano and then the arm down her throat. Good times. So really, this horror is sort of created from her own performance life and that world being turned against her. There's the Morris Pizza Hut freezer plan. He introduces the possible way to stop the curse is to actually kill Sky, but not forever. Temporarily kill her, break the chain of the monstrosity, and then revive her. Makes sense to me. Why didn't anybody come up with this sooner? And the plan adds a procedural element. For once, someone may understand the rules enough to intervene, which is what everybody's hoping, that if this had worked out the way he described, then maybe Sky goes on to another sequel. So kind of like in the first movie, how Rose goes and sees that guy at the jail. Like that. This is kind of like the ray of hope.
Maybe, just maybe.
Yes. But by the time she ends up in the freezer, there's just more uncertainty because we can't fully trust at this point that what she's experiencing is really happening.
Right.
And in my theory, it is not. And then the whole thing ends with the final concert, the arena sequence. The curse reaches maximum public scale. Sky's breakdown becomes performance. The entity turns spectacle into transmission. The ending implies possible mass exposure, which this is the sequel's biggest expansion of the mythology. Like, where could this go from here?
Right. Like, everything else has always been singles.
Yep. It turns the curse from intimate trauma chain into possible mass event.
Well, I mean, we can talk about cultural trauma. Yeah, that's such a weird... I wonder where they're going to go with it.
Before we go into what we think might be coming in the third one, do you want to talk a little bit about the theory or sort of where reality is in this movie and where it stops?
I think in the first one, it's pretty clear that Rose never leaves the house, even though she thinks she's escaped and she's gone to Joel's apartment, and then he does the grin and then find out, oh no, she's actually still in the house, right? It is less clear in this one where we depart from reality, and obviously we know when we come back to reality because she comes right from the freezer room to performing on stage, but then her mom's still alive, so that didn't happen.
That's where I think the disconnect happened. Well, I mean, there's obviously several times where she's experiencing hallucinations.
Yes.
But when it finally overcomes her, I think is when the dancers basically overcome her in the apartment. And whether or not the beginning of the conversation with her mom is real or not, I'm not sure. But I think that it is that scene where she wakes up sort of in the treatment center that everything switches to hallucination from there. And I think everything else before that was reality sprinkled with moments of hallucination.
Which is crazy because, like, when she gets in the car and then realizes that Gemma is actually the entity and then gets the call from Gemma saying, oh, I wasn't there, I haven't seen you. And that, I guess, the first time I saw the movie, I took that as truth, that there never had been a Gemma. And actually, in the apartment, when Gemma spends the night and then comes back with Matcha, Elizabeth doesn't acknowledge Gemma's presence in the room. Like when Elizabeth shows up and says, you're late and 100 people are waiting for you. And Gemma says something, but Elizabeth never talks to Gemma.
See, I think that when they show us, they do show us Gemma and Elizabeth together when Skye goes off into another room. And to me, that is signaling that that is real. Because why else would they show us, even if Elizabeth, we know Elizabeth's a dick.
Yes.
So I think maybe she's not acknowledging Gemma at that point because she's unimportant to this moment. And like everything else, Elizabeth is just focused on getting Skye out there on the stage.
Yeah, but she had been like, why don't you call Gemma and get her to come with you? Like, you think that there would be some sort of interaction between them if she hasn't seen her for a year.
Well, she comes in like a bat out of hell because she's pissed
True.
that she doesn't show up, and the scene ends with Gemma standing there. Skye has left the room and it's just Gemma and Elizabeth, and Gemma goes, hi, Elizabeth.
Right.
And that is how the scene ends. So to me, that tells me, because there would otherwise be no reason to show us something between characters that are not Skye.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
So I think that that's real. I think the original moment, I think the bar meeting between Morris and Skye is real, that he kind of tells her this, but then she walks out on him because he told her we need to do this as soon as possible.
Before it like gets its claws into you.
So
Yeah.
I think that it's possible that if she'd gone with it at that time, maybe she could have gotten out of it, but she waited way too long. And so basically after she wakes up, after she's been attacked in her apartment by the dancers, then from then on until she walks out onto the stage, everything at that point is a hallucination, including sort of the reverse Gemma thing that you were talking about. That was kind of manipulating her, being like, oh, that bit of comfort that you thought you had, which in my theory, she did have that. She did reconnect. The entity's basically stripping that away from her. Like this little glimmer of forward progress that you've experienced, that didn't happen.
And by letting Skye say, I'm in control, I'm in control, I'm in control, and then she's driving the car all of a sudden, that all of that was just to make her feel like she had won,
Right.
so that the entity could then drag it out from underneath.
Which it did in the first movie with Rose, too.
No, fair point.
It let her think that she had won when she hadn't.
So, yeah. No, that's okay. That's convincing. I'm convinced.
Was there anything else in sort of the... Oh, yeah. And then before we go on to themes, where do you think this could go?
Yeah, I mean, if the entity can only bond to one at a time, it now has a choice of like who's the most fucked up person who saw that happen. Like whose mind, after Skye's mind, was like a feast for this thing. I think one person who watched it happen is going to get the demon, and we're going to follow them and their life. That's my guess.
So there's nothing that tells me that the entity has to focus on one person.
That maybe there's more than one
Yeah.
of them, or that
Like
it can
it's
split.
like spreading like a disease. But I do think that it does start to get into trickier territory, because what these movies do so well is build the character that we're focused on so well. So it would need to still focus on one person, but maybe it's in a world where this is spreading, where multiple people are experiencing it.
I don't know. Then it starts to go beyond the bounds of folk horror and become more like Bird Box or what's the other? Or A Quiet Place, right? Where it's like a monster movie.
It's definitely a fine line, but I mean, I think that if the franchise is going to keep going forward and continue to be interesting, it is going to have to take some chances, and whether or not they work, We'll see.
I know, but I think what works is that Parker Finn has written these characters so well that this really is a deep study of trauma in these people's lives. I don't know. We'll see. I'm not sure I could be convinced that there's more than one, but we'll see.
We shall see. All right. Take me out with themes, Bibba Cakes.
Okay. We've covered a lot of these so far, so we'll kind of run through them briefly, but fame as a curse, parasocial relationships. I mean, the whole, like, the signature, the autograph session, like, that creepy guy was creepy. That was not the entity.
As was the girl.
As the girl, unless I think the entity was making her look like she was smiling.
Oh, fair.
Right. It just, that fame is its own curse. And I think for celebrities, there's plenty of celebrities that would happen for. Oh, here it is. So Finn has cited Amy Winehouse and Whitney Houston as influences on Sky's arc. And then a lot of reviewers reach for Britney Spears watching the film, which makes sense. That when someone is being live streamed, like when she has to dress up to go out to the bar, right? And then all of a sudden people notice her and she's like, the entity doesn't need to do anything. The crowd is going to do it, right? Like someone's like, oh my God, I saw you throw that old lady, right? Like, why would you, if you saw a person in your own life do something horrible like that, you wouldn't go up to them and be like, I just saw you do that thing. Like, I don't know. It would just be very different. The industry's demand for Sky to just like push through her pain is exactly what feeds the entity and makes her so vulnerable. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, poor celebrities, wah, wah. Like, they got it pretty good for the most part, right? But I do think that, you know, fame as a curse is something we've seen in a lot of other movies. A lot of other have explored this as well. And this is linked to that isolation theme that we've talked about already. Despite total visibility, despite the fact that all these people love her, there's the parasocial relationships, isolation. And Scott has said isolation is the word that comes up the most for her when she thinks about Sky. And Sky really is super alone. And she tries to say this to the people. I think doing this tour was a big mistake. She's trying to speak honestly. She's not being believed. Someone tells her she's overreacting and her assistant agrees that she's overreacting. Like nobody just tells her the truth or what's happening. She's totally alone. Addiction and relapse. We've talked about that pretty thoroughly, I think, that Sky's recovery is not, people in her life are not actually concerned with her recovery. They were concerned about what she can do for them and not who she is. No one's really worried about Sky. They're worried about Sky Riley, like the image. And then that moves on to exploitation and kind of the body as a product. Like when her mom says, we can cover that with makeup, instead of being like, oh my God, my daughter's face is smashed up. Sky's body is like a surface to manage. When she doesn't want to wear the costume because it shows the scar on her belly, and her mom is like, it's great. It's a great story. Everybody loves it, right? Like her body is not her own. It is a product that is meant for others. I did see, because Substance came out in 2024 as well, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that topic of kind of like how a woman celebrity's body belongs to the rest of the world and not to herself, I think that's a really important theme. And when then she wears the sweatshirt of herself to cover up her mother's blood, but it doesn't cover it, right? But it like literally her body is not real. Like her face is covering her face. It's crazy. And then self-destruction of drugs, and then the doubling. We've got the mirrors and the reflections, which we talked about a little bit before. Sky Riley that everybody sees is a mask. It's not actually her. And so that there's this visual language about kind of a public persona and a private self. And I think, you know, thinking about artists who write really vulnerably and who write about things like this, Sky writing about the accident, and then this is something that other people connect to her through the songs. Like one of the fans was like, I got through this because of you. Like you saved my life. That's a huge responsibility. And I think it's so, if Sky was healthier, if she was truly sober because she wanted to be and not because she was forced to be, then maybe she would be able to see her music helping people as a positive. But the where she's at, it's just another piece of responsibility that she has to carry. She's not actually helping with her art. people are using it that way, but and then it's just so tough. I feel really bad for Skye, and it's mostly because of the people around her. There was one thing I saw in one article on discussing film, but Finn has talked about using the audience's familiarity with the first film's rules against them. So that's kind of the meta piece of it, like the sequel as subversion. Obviously, this is a person who appreciates classic horror and the genre has always been self-deprecating, self-referential, and meta. As we learned in the movie we just watched, the last horror film from 1982, which was super meta, well before Scream. And so I think the sequel lands differently. I think the first one still scares me more after this second watch. I think the first time we watched them, each time I was super scared because I think the second one is flashier and shinier. But I think that the subversion is there for sure. But that's it for themes. I think we covered a lot of them throughout this time, but that's it for story time.
Does that mean it's time for me to tune my strings? And
as soon as you tell me who your favorite character is.
Oh, I'd like to say Skye for sure. I just really thought that was a great character, and she does so well. Just the responsibility as the actor for Naomi Scott to carry that whole thing. But that also seems kind of obvious, so I really liked Lewis.
Yeah.
Like really well pulled off that character really well.
Yeah. I'm going to go with Gemma. It was between Gemma and Lewis for me. I mean, I think Skye is an easy pick, as you said. And then, do you have a favorite quote? Did you write? You have your notebook with you.
Yep.
That never happens.
That doesn't mean I have a quote, but I have the notebook.
Okay, good. That's a step in the right direction.
A couple. Is it Lewis who says, "I'm having the worst week"? Oh, yes. When she goes into his apartment and he's like so excited to see her, even though they've texted and he doesn't remember texting because he was dealing with the monstrosity. And he's obviously very coked up. He goes, "I'm having the worst week." The worst. Because his week has been dealing with the monstrosity. So that was one I really liked. Let me see if there's anything else here. Oh, at the meet and greet, the Alfredo guy, the creepy guy, said, "I can see you're sad on the inside."
Oh, yeah.
And then he says, "You have the most amazing skin."
There was a lot from Skye, but one that I haven't mentioned yet was music gave me everything I ever wanted. Then again, music almost killed me.
Yep.
Which I thought really encapsulates kind of exactly that twist that Skye is trying to wrap herself around. Cool. Now it's time to get teed up for the songs. We had freestyle this week.
Yep.
All right, let's get ready for the open mic.
Let's see who goes first. Call it in the air.
Okay. Heads.
It's heads. Who's going first?
I'll go first.
All right. Let me get us set up.
Cool.
Ladies and gents, we proudly present
For your listening delights, this week's open mic.
Okay, so we're freestyle this week. Yep, exactly. That is not the style that I'm going to be going with, but I like that because it does give us a lot of openness, but it also doesn't give us a lot of boundaries to bounce off of. This movie, though, has so many deep themes that I leaned into. We talked about isolation as regards her addiction and trauma and all that. And that was kind of the really sweet spot for me when I was thinking about how this movie left me feeling this time around. And so that is where I went with it. I think it's called Crowded Room or maybe Float Away. I'm not sure yet, but that's okay. This doesn't have to be perfect. It's the open mic. This is the first try. And if we decide to workshop it a little bit more, maybe we can come up with a good title.
Alone in a crowded room, Hope someone will find me soon, and I try to be the me that I know, but then how will the show go? And it must, so I just float away, float away, float away. Every good and pure thing is broken, it's a sure thing. Once I happen by, if only you could see the world that's inside me, then you know where I go when I float away, float away, float away. Hey, I float away.
Very nice.
Little different.
Yeah,
I know
like
we're
it.
I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later next week, I think. Talk about kind of like more process stuff. But yeah, I wanted to try something different, something slower, less words.
I think it paid off.
Yeah, it feels, and I think I might be able to write a bridge for it, or maybe another verse, although structurally that's pretty common for me, 3 verses and a chorus. But I think that the loneliness that Sky feels because of her addiction and her fame and the contrast of those things, I think anybody that's ever escaped can maybe resonate with that a little bit. And the entity took advantage of that, right? And broke her brain because she felt so alone, and that desire to escape, that, you know, addiction very often is just escaping from pain that is not manageable. So yeah, so I feel pretty good about that one. But
No, I really liked it. And also, I'm hoping that it won't be picked up on the mic, but partway through it, our cat who hates you singing was scratching at the floor like she does. So if anybody's wondering, like, is something wrong with the microphone or something? No, it's just the stupid cat.
she has always, especially if I sing in a certain range or if I sing loudly, she will start to get very aggravated. She sometimes will jump up and scratch me. So I'm glad she did. Or she's hit me in the face before while I'm singing. She'll come up and just like poke me with her paw. But luckily she didn't do that. So, oh well, cat, next time. Let's get you set up.
Sounds good.
All right, cool.
All right. Me toca a me. So I went a little different direction with my song than you did, which makes sense because freestyle has the least amount of boundaries. It has none. No border lines, no restrictions. And we can chat more later. But for now, I don't. Yeah, she's got no mic, and that's probably how we should always do it. I'm calling this for now my challenging relationship. Fictional. Or at least, yeah, fictional. I fell in love with a pop star, And she always broke my heart. From the start, I was alarmed. I fell in love with a pop star. From day one, I should have known it, because the cracks were clearly showing. But I told myself that she was under pressure. She was glossy in the zines, but she was rough behind the scenes. Though I hoped my love was something that she'd treasure. But I had it wrong all along. I should have noticed early on that she was already gone. I fell in love with a pop star, and she always broke my heart. From the start, I was alarmed. I fell in love with a pop star. She barely gave me her attention, and I should have learned my lesson. But I just thought tomorrow will be better. And tomorrow came and went. She ignored the messages I sent. I'll have to find another way to go and get her. 'Cause I had it wrong all along. I should have noticed early on that she was already gone. I fell in love with a pop star, and she always broke my heart. From the start, I was alarmed. I fell in love with a pop star. The biggest thing I've learned, and it's not that love is earned, it's that court orders are just pieces of paper. The biggest thing I've lost is my freedom at all cost. 'Cause what some call love, others call a caper. Fell in love with a pop star, and she always broke my heart. From the start, I was alarmed. I fell in love with a pop star.
Yay! Here I come. That was great.
Thank you.
That was fun.
Yes, I went a little cheeky this week.
It was a little cheeky, and there were some places where it fell in love with a pop star, love with a pop star. Like I heard echoes, you know? So that was good.
And I'm a stalker in it. Did you catch that?
I did catch that at the end. I thought that was very clever.
It's a little twist.
Were you the naked guy in the apartment?
What?
Was it the guy from The Signing who was obsessed with her?
Honestly, I was not thinking about that. That would make more sense.
That's what flashed into my mind when I realized that you were a stalker.
I was really thinking more of Joe Spinell's character in the last horror film, which we mentioned briefly earlier.
That's great.
But yes, your idea is what it is.
That's awesome. Nice work. This was fun. Our last song of our first year.
Woohoo!
This is 22, right?
I don't know.
Well, I'll come back next week and tell you what the correct number is. All right, cool. Let's get back to our places. This is awkward on the floor over here.
Sounds good.
Okay, cool.
All right, we're losing light. Time to wrap this up.
Alrighty.
We don't have to spin because after our encore next week, which is our 52nd episode,
That's crazy.
One episode a week for an entire year. We're glad you're here. Don't steer clear. Sorry, Rachel's shaking her head in discouragement and disappointment. We're going to be covering Jaws
Yeah.
over 2 episodes after that. So no need to spin that. Should I spin for a gimmick? For
Yes,
songwriting?
please spin for a gimmick. And then will we fill in... Oh, no, we don't have anything to fill in because we spun the sequel. That's
Yep.
right. Okay, so we'll spin at the end of... And Jaws is going to be a 2-parter, right?
Yep.
Yes. So 2 Jaws episodes and an encore. So we've got a while before we spin a new movie.
I know. the Jaws gimmick for the writing of the song is first and final lines.
Okay.
So basically, we take the first line of the movie and the final line of the movie and incorporate that somehow into our song.
Cool. I like that.
We haven't done this one before. It sounds like a fun jumping off point.
It does sound fun. I'm excited.
And where can they find us other than here, where they found us today?
You can find us on your favorite social media platform at OMNLD Pod. We give little micro reviews and reactions to movies we've watched. John shows off his physical media collection. It's a fun time over there. And you could also email us, find us on the internet, omnldpod.com.
And omnldpod@gmail.com.
Yes.
So,
But we'd love to hear from you. And if you've made it through this 51 weeks of the open mic, congratulations.
yes, congratulations to you, Miss Rachel.
And to you, Mr. John.
Well, I hope that you don't get the monstrosity in you,
I hope not to.
because that means that I'm probably next.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And I'm wishing that to all of our listeners out there.
May you not be possessed by monstrosity.
But join us next week for a special encore where we delve into how we started this podcast, how we ended up here, the changes along the way, the learning moments, the all the times that Rachel's made me cry behind the scenes.
I told you not to tell them about that.
Please, Miss Rachel. All right, but until then, keep watching horror movies.
See ya.
Bye.